So, as we get started, just taking our first look at Thomas Aquinas and his so called natural law approach. It's a little different. Maybe it's a lot different from Kant or utilitarianism, in that it's not so easy to find rules to apply. The ethical decision making framework is not as tight, it's not as focused. And I should say that my approach to Thomas Aquinas is probably a lot different from a lot of other people's. Um, and I don't know if that's important, but maybe we'll see why. But why isn't it as tight and focused? Well, I think about Kant gives you very, well articulated rules in the categorical imperatives. He says, to any situation, apply these rules, and it'll give you a very firm sense of whether doing this thing would be ethical or not. In utilitarianism, we get maybe a less focused rule, um, which turns out to be something like maximize the amount of happiness that results to human beings in whatever you do and minimize the amount of unhappiness. Less focused, but still something fairly definite. Thomas never gives us such a definite imperative. What he gives us is a very general imperative right away. He says, consequently, the first principle of practical reason, and practical reason refers to anything that people do, thinking about what should be done, is one founded on the notion of good, viz., that good is that which all things seek after. Okay, it's very classical. Everything seeks after the good. The good is the natural goal of everybody all the time. Hence, this is the first precept, the first rule, the first tenet, first principle of law, that good is to be done and pursued, and evil is to be avoided. All other precepts of the natural law are based upon this. So there it is. Good is to be done and evil is to be avoided. What he's saying is that is the built in, self evident, absolutely taken for granted precept or rule that we're following all the time and we can't help but follow, or that we at least can't help but agree to, that the good should be done, that evil should be avoided. And that's what he would regard to be the self evident first principle of practical reason and therefore morality. The good is to be done, and evil is to be avoided. That's the rock, the very foundation of morality. And the idea is that it's a first principle. It can't really be argued for because it's so deep, right? It's the thing that is always assumed. And if you try to, I guess, prove it, you'll find that there's nothing deeper in your reason consciousness that you could use to prove it with, because it's already more self-evidently true. It's already more obviously true than anything you could try to prove it with. So that's at least the claim. The good is to be done and pursued, and evil is to be avoided. So that's an imperative, and it is what it is. The problem is trying to apply it, right? Because it is so general. Um, how do you actually apply that? Well, I'm thinking of doing something or not doing something, whatever the ethical situation is, and I want to apply this principle. The good should be avoided, and excuse me, the good should be pursued, and evil avoided. How does it actually help you or guide you in any specific situation? It's very difficult because we can say, "Well, I want to do the good," but what is the good? What is the good in this particular situation? And what is evil? I mean, you can just basically say that evil is whatever detracts from the good, or evil is whatever is contrary to the good. But the question is, what is the good in any particular situation? It's not that you can answer that question perfectly. We know that with Kant and utilitarianism, there's going to be uncertainty. There's going to be room for judgment always. So we shouldn't expect Thomas to give us absolutely specific directions in every situation and what to do, but we should at least get something more useful than do the good. And he does supply that. He gives us a sense of what the goods are, how to find them. And it's actually very, very interesting. He says, since, however, good has the nature of an end, and evil the nature of a contrary, hence it is that all those things to which man has a natural inclination are naturally apprehended by reason as being good, and consequently as objects of pursuit, and their contraries as evil and objects of avoidance. So, this is where the religious or theological view that comes along with Thomas's natural law, at least, is really crucial, because the idea is that if we're looking to answer the question, what are the goods, we look to ourselves and that to which we're naturally inclined. And that really depends upon the notion that if there is something to which human beings have a natural inclination, a natural desire, then that was implanted in them by God. So that that inclination couldn't really be towards the evil, it would have to be towards the good. Now, this has got to be taken with a certain amount of, care. It's not that everything we want is good, but our deepest inclinations give us a sense of what is good. So he says, because in man there is, first of all, an inclination to good in accordance with the nature which he has in common with all substances, inasmuch as every substance seeks the preservation of its own being, according to its nature, and by reason of this inclination, whatever is a means of preserving human life and warding off its obstacles belongs to the natural law, which is to say, is a good, right? That is, human beings, like all other substances, like all other beings of any sort, have a natural inclination to preserve themselves. So, what does that indicate? That what we have a natural inclination to preserve is good. That is, our lives. So, human life is a good, if you see where this is going. By looking at our deepest inclinations, we get a sense of what the goods are that are to be pursued. Human life is a good. He says, secondly, there is in man an inclination to things that pertain to him more especially according to that nature which he has in common with other animals. And in virtue of this inclination, those things are said to belong to the natural law which nature has taught to all animals, such as sexual intercourse, education of offspring, and so forth. So that is, we have a natural inclination towards sex, and sex leads to reproduction. So, and reproduction means children. So those things are good. That is, the education of children, the family results is a good. So we've identified some more goods by looking at that to which we're naturally inclined. Then he says, thirdly, there is in man an inclination to good according to the nature of his reason, which nature is proper to him. Thus, man has a natural inclination to know the truth. That is, human beings are reasonable creatures who have a natural curiosity to know. We have a deep inclination to have knowledge and towards truth. So knowledge is a good, truth is a good. So by looking at our inclinations, we can begin to assemble something like the goods in a more specific way than just saying the good is to be pursued. Well, what goods? Well, human life is a good. The education of children and the care of children is good. Family is a good. Human community is a good. Truth and knowledge are goods, and anything that's destructive of these things are evils. So we begin to specify what the good is by looking at ourselves.